He has co-founded various technology startups ranging from Dream Tech to serve the South African vehicle insurance industries, Health Screen for workplace safety, and most recently, Octobase and Aardbank to help enable intelligent ways to manage trust on the Ethereum blockchain. Originally, he was heavily involved in pioneering new artificial intelligence projects, specifically in computer vision, before he discovered his love for cryptocurrencies in 2013. Eventually, he decided to focus his energy on building tools for this new world of finance. He and his co-founders are currently producing tools to help people onboard their own trust-based communities into the blockchain ecosystem without compromising security. If he were forced to choose just one attribute before blockchain technology that excites him, it would be the technology's potential to free smaller communities from tyrannies of the larger ones. Please put your virtual hands together for Cornelius Gouws. Cornelius, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking a bit about trust specifically, and also then how trust actually, and the reason why it would be important for us to focus on this now. I know there's currently a lot of hype around DeFi, and I think there's a lot of good things still to come from DeFi. But we need to kind of start wondering what's the thing that's going to come after that, and what do we have in the world already, and how can we start utilizing that in intelligent ways also on the blockchain with future applications also coming on. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Cornelius Gouws. And like Chris explained to everybody, I've co-founded Octobase and Aardbank. Octobase is mostly a research company. Aardbank's where we're going to produce some commercial tools, but specifically focus around how can you get your trust-based networks onboarded onto the blockchain technologies again and use those to facilitate some of the commercial transactions we used to, but also some of your social transactions like your will and estate planning or password management and recovery and identity, that kind of things. Okay, so the big question I think that we should be asking is, what is it that arrives after DeFi? So currently everybody is very excited about DeFi, and I think there's very good reasons for us to be excited about DeFi, but putting our sight a bit on the horizon, what's the kind of things we can expect going forward, and what would we need to enable the new things that might come after DeFi? So to give you kind of an intro into there, we can talk a bit about trust. What is it, and what is it not, and what can we get to how it's useful for us? So there are two ways that we can distinguish between types of trusts. So there's something where we would trust somebody's character, and there's something where we would trust somebody's ability, and the two is not always coincides with one another. Somebody whose character you might trust a lot is not necessarily somebody who's financial savvy you would necessarily trust as much. And then also at the same time, somebody who you might think has these great ability and you would be trustworthy of their ability is not necessarily somebody whose character you'd be able to trust. And currently in DeFi, there's a big movement for us to be able to go to ways of mitigating the trust in a lot of these instances where we don't need to trust people's characters anymore or abilities anymore. So some examples about that specifically could be how to align the incentives. So there's great ways where you can see where trust has been mitigated by some projects, like the DAI from MakerDAO is a great example of how people provably can say all the funds are there, they're following some rules. You don't have to trust somebody to have the funds that they say it's backing the underlying currency in reserve. Anybody can go and check for themselves. So you mitigated the idea of trust completely. Augur, the prediction market. They've done a lot with game theory, the way of constructing the way information is being input into the system to make sure that it's in everybody's best interest to not try and cheat on the information that would be needed in the real world to resolve some of their prediction markets. And then you get places like the Kyber network with decentralized exchanges. And the nice thing about decentralized exchanges is you can see the funds is there. The funds are there. You don't have to worry about if the funds are really there, somebody else able to steal it from the company. You can see the code. You can see that the actual assets is there. And in these ways, we're actually mitigating trust, which is a great idea in DeFi in general. But, okay, so DeFi, a large driver of it is the ERC20 tokens. And the ERC20 tokens are great in that it, a token in the same range, each one is the same. So you have this, every token kind of equal for a specific token. So one DAI can be exchanged for any other DAI. If you have a maker, one maker can be exchanged for any other maker also in the process. And that's been great. And there's a lot of applications where we need fungibility, especially in finance and storing value, where you would like to have something that's fungible and make sure it acts the way no matter which one you can get. But we need to go a bit further and just understand communities. So community, no matter how we think about it or how we try and justify it, we can't really follow the old adage that says the whole world is just one global village. People are very different. Cultures are very different. So this is an example of one of the most advanced or biggest societies in the world. This is actually not human population, but the Argentine ant. And even though they are genetically identical to each other, they still form different colonies. They might have the same group spanning across continents, but eventually even those breaks up and they form sub-communities. And it's not unification of the whole world. It's not something that we're going to see happening always. So we need to start and try and say, how can we manage our individual trust levels that we can have? Because trust is, unlike ERC-20 tokens, not fungible. I would trust my father, for example, to help me recover some of my funds, but I wouldn't trust him to necessarily manage it because it's not his skills and his forte. So we have tried some methods of implementing trust yet on the blockchain, but they've been very naive. So one example would be social recovery. So if you were to have a community here where people were to have an owner and two people that can help him recover his account, and they have voting rights and 50% or more of the voting rights go through, that'd be great if we go to a scenario where the owner's account has been compromised. Then the two guardians can help him recover his account. But if we go to a scenario where the guardian's account has been compromised, one of the guardians, then that funds can actually be removed, even though an intuitive understanding of the scenario would be that this funds should be recoverable because the owner and the other guardian is still not compromised. So we've seen some naive ways of trying to get trust implemented on the blockchain, but they're not quite there yet. And I think there's a lot of research that is still to be done here, and that's going to lead to a lot of new applications we can bring in. So we have various trust models, which is shared control, which is the most one we can get with the ERC20 model for the trust-based community. But some that we haven't covered yet is hierarchical control and democracy. And for those, to get those, we're going to enable a lot of things. We'll be able to get people to trust that you can trust to help you recover your funds. And we can also trust people to invest your funds, but not actually be able to withdraw your funds. Kind of having a sage without having access to your bank account, but investing in your in your best interest because it may be in their best interest. Then we can also have dispute mediation and community decisions that has equal representation based on head count rather than the amount of money somebody has or tokens that they have. But to get to this point, one of the things we need to try and solve still, we need to try and solve identity. The entity will be the key to do this. For example, in the community, to make sure that nobody gets more say that they actually should get, we can go and we say, listen, we need to have one vote per person. But this is something that we can just do if we are able to understand who the various people is on the individual players that are available. And also we need to have opinions of who people think we are also. It's not just me, myself, that I need to prove I am, but we also need some kind of social cohesion of saying, how do we go about for people to say, this is this person, and this is what this community think of him, but this is what another community might think of him. So, and then you also need a history of actions within the context of a certain community, and some privacy to be able to identify, to hold on to these kind of models. So if we take the identity model into account, we move back to some of our previous trust models that we have, you'll see currently the ERC model is supporting a lot of this shared control, because no matter who you are, your identity is not a big thing. It's more like shares in a company would be a close example for this. So if you have a large amount of control, you get a larger say in this. But not all of the models we have in the world works like that. A good example would be voting, where we have equal representation based on person rather on their amount of ownership within a certain project. And then another model also would be hierarchical controls. So, for example, in the democracy one, let's say that you want to run a community project where a bunch of community owners, home owners associations come together and they say, we want home owners to have rights of interacting with our decisions. That kind of thing would be based on identity rather than on share of ownership within it. So typical home owners organization model for that would be to have your each individual have a vote for each home that they own. Doesn't matter the size of the home, doesn't matter the amount of money the house is worth. You being part of that community, having a home, have the same say as somebody else in that community with a home also. And if you were to invest the homeowners association funds or appoint certain people, that would be another thing. Another thing is also differentiated control, which frequently showed up in our hierarchical kind of control structure. So one example of that would be the social recovery we mentioned earlier. For that, you need to know who the people are that you're interacting with, and whether you trust them in certain capacities, because trust is not necessarily something that we have that is based on a blanket rule. You know, you might trust somebody to help you with the security of your account, but you won't necessarily trust them to help you invest your account. And that's the kind of things that identity would help also alleviate in this process. And it doesn't have to be that identity have to be stored in the blockchain, but you need to have a way of saying that the people I appoint should have differentiated roles and not a specific blanket kind of roles that we're mostly seeing at this stage in most of the DeFi projects, though we are starting to see some differentiations going forward. And my suspicion is this is the kind of things that we're going to see going forward. More and more people being allowed differentiated kind of roles in certain projects to allow people to participate based on their ability rather on just their ownership. So if we need to go and now summarize a bunch of these things together, DeFi is great. It's just as great as what blockchain was when blockchain just initially started. And it started enabling, blockchain then started enabling a lot of the DeFi projects that we have. And currently we're moving towards enabling a lot more things with DeFi projects, and the direction that we're heading is very, very interesting. It's a great kind of direction that we are going into. But we need to also realize that trust isn't a fungible thing. we need to start thinking about how can we bring in trust based on the different individuals' perception of trust, because trust is not a big thing necessarily just to one person. That can be applied to all the other people. And how do we start catering for this? So example could be that we can start saying that an investor opens up his portfolio on a smart contract, and you can say, I trust him to invest for me, and say, follow his investments on these positions that he has. But the investor himself would not have access to your funds. So there's a lot of other products that starts opening up also then. Like, for example, will and estate management. What happens when you die? If we can have a differentiated role where you can put a trusted individual in charge of this, then you can say, I trust this person to facilitate the distribution of my will and estate on should my account become inactive. And we start opening up a lot of these other alternative products that we are not currently considering, and that we can start considering along the line going forward. And then to get the maximum value of this, one of the things that we're starting to consider, and we've been talking about this a lot, but it's not quite been solved that extensively yet, is how do we start getting identity onto the blockchain, or enabling people to interact with the certain identities on this also. And I think that's the big thing where we're currently at that still needs solving. And I think that's the next fields that we are going to start seeing a lot of research going in, a lot of development going in, and trial and errors, probably a bunch of things that's going to work or not going to work down the line. Okay, thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed the